What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to day 2 of the A to Z copywriting workshop. Hope you guys and gals got the chance to rest a bit and got ready for today. Today is going to be even more jam-packed, more, fast-paced than yesterday. And so, let me see here. There we go. Want to make sure that you guys can, if somebody can let me know right in the chat that you can see me, that you can hear me A-okay, that would be great. Perfect. Thank you so much, David. And so we are not going to play around at all. We're going to jump back into where we left off yesterday. I'm going to finish off with some of the foundational principles. We're going to talk a little bit more about the marketing argument, hooks, themes, ideas, and then we are going to jump into the nitty-gritty details, the nuts and bolts stuff of how to apply all the foundational principles in practical terms. And once again, I would tell you that I'm not going to cover everything, like every nitty-gritty detail of everything. I'm going to give you exactly what it is that you need to know and understand to be able to use these different techniques, tactics, and so on. And we're going to go through these at lightning pace. And so if you've got any urgent questions that you really want to make sure get answered now, you can go ahead and pop those into the little Q&A thing. If not, no biggie, hold them for tomorrow night. As a reminder, tomorrow night at 5 p.m., we kick off our open live Q&A, your opportunity to ask me any questions about copy, anything that I covered here, applying these tactics, and so on. Yes, Aaron, you will be getting the recordings, the audio and video, the unedited recordings tomorrow afternoon. And then after the Q&A session, you'll get the recording of that. And then we're going to have that transcribed for you as well. Yes, Scott, you can actually direct message me on Facebook rather than send it in to the support team. You can just send it right to me on Facebook, and I'll answer that for you. With that, I think that is all of the housekeeping that I wanted to cover. I want to jump back in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen over here again, and we're going to get back to hooks, themes, and ideas. And so somebody go ahead and just let me know that, yes, you can see the slide deck now. You can see this screen. That would be great. Awesome. Thank you, David, Chris, Scott. Beautiful. Perfect. So again, we're still in the foundational, the foundational elements, laying the groundwork. But I want to talk about hooks, themes, and ideas. And again, I want to give you a high level overview of our objective of what it is that we're ultimately trying to do with the kind of the hook, the theme, the idea behind our campaign. Now, remember, you heard me say yesterday that the hook, the theme, is really the overarching idea for the marketing campaign. The way that I want you to think about it is, it's really for a lack of a better phrase, it's the appeal of the marketing message. It's the idea, the narrative, the storyline, the idea behind the marketing message. So again, we're not talking about the idea behind your product. We're not talking about how you're positioning your product as some disruptive technology. We're talking about the idea, the hook for the marketing message itself. And our first aim, or the aim of the hook, really, and the way that I think about this, and this is something that I first learned many moons ago from Bill Bonner, the founder of the Agora companies, is our aim with the hook, the idea, the theme is to avoid what he referred to as the categorical imperative. Now, if you look up categorical imperative, don't worry about the official definition. It's a little bit different from the way Bill articulated it. But ultimately, what this is all about is we are trying to prevent the prospect from being able to categorize our idea into a known bucket. In other words, what happens is, as human beings, when we encounter information, when we encounter marketing messages, ideas, we look for where do I put this that I'm already familiar with? We look to be able to say, oh, this is a trick on Facebook. This is all about a certain type of fertilizer. We look for the pattern. We look for the bucket that we want to be able to put this in, so that we can say, oh, I've heard it, seen it, know it, aware of it. And so what we are looking to do is to prevent the prospect from being able to do that. We want to pique their curiosity, which we're going to break this down. We want to pique their curiosity. We want to pique their interest. We want to start to get them a little excited. We want to convey that we've got something that is going to benefit you, something that is different from what you've heard before, a different perspective, a different story, a different angle. But we want to try to prevent them from being able to put it into a box or a bucket. So what the prospect is thinking when they encounter your idea, your hook, right? And when we come up with a hook for a campaign, that hook carries over to our ads. It carries over to most of the early emails that we send out to our house list. And so what prospects immediately do, they look at that, and whether it be kind of unconsciously, can I put this into a bucket that I already know? Do I know what this is all about? And so we're trying to prevent that. I like to say that we are trying to prevent mental opt-out. What I do not want our prospects to say is, oh, I've seen that before. Oh, I've heard that before. And this is an important principle, kind of like this is one of those things that you should circle, highlight, write down, and keep out in front of you when you are developing hooks, and you're even then translating your hooks and your ideas into headlines. You want to sit back and you want to ask yourself, what I know about the market, will they see this as something that they've heard before? Will they see this as something that they're already aware of? Will they see this as something that they already know? Will they see this as something that fits neatly and nicely into an existing bucket in their mind so that they can dismiss it? You have to understand that is almost a shortcut that the brain uses to determine whether it's going to invest energy in paying attention to something or not. Right. And when we see it as, I know it, I've heard it, certainly when we see it as, I know it, I've heard it, right? I already get it. I've already been told that. I'm already aware of it. We dismiss it immediately. We have that mental opt-out. We check out because got it already. Totally don't need it. Remember, what people are interested in is new and different. This is why at social gatherings, people will say, what's new? They don't want to know what's the same in your life. People aren't looking for more of the same. They're looking for new. They're looking for different. They associate new and different with better, right, wrong, or indifferent. And so we want to avoid that. I want to avoid that categorical imperative. I want to have enough curiosity, enough mystery in there where they're like, I'm not quite sure what this is. I know there's a benefit there to me. There's a payoff. There's a result. There's an alleviation of a problem for me, but I'm not quite sure what the solution is. I'm not, and that's the part that we don't want them to be able to categorize. What is he talking about? A tweak to copy? Is he talking about a new copy? Is he talking about a new language? Is he talking about, well, what exactly is this? I'm not sure. So there's enough curiosity and mystery to prevent that categorization and prevent that mental opt-out. Now, with that kind of as the backdrop, and that's what I'm always looking for, for what it's worth, so that you guys you guys can you guys understand the mindset, right? Big broad overview, big sweeping overview is when it comes to the idea, the hook, the angle, I am always looking for different. My team, who I believe I think Chris Cole is back with us today again, and Teddy Garcia is back with us today again, two incredible marketers that I get to work with. These guys, right, they hear me say all the time, different. I don't want more of the same, because more of the same doesn't garner attention. And so what's different? What's a different way for me to talk about the common thing? Right. And you're gonna see in just a second, there's a slide where I talk about what is the extraordinary way to talk about the ordinary. How can I take the ordinary and talk about it in a way that feels extraordinary? I don't mean using using superlatives. I don't mean using exaggerated claims. I mean, what is the unique angle? What is the unique perspective? What is the unique story? What is the story that nobody else is telling? The angle that nobody else is sharing that I can share? How can I take the common, and how can I look at it from a different angle, right? And see a different angle that others aren't talking about, that others aren't seeing. And how can I bring that and use that as the hook to get the attention of the marketplace, so that they see it as different, so that it piques curiosity, so that they can't categorize it. With that as the backdrop, right? And that's what I'm always looking for, different. So ultimately, right, I'm thinking about and looking for two things, right? Not at the same time, but one of two things. I'm either sitting back, and I told you guys yesterday that thinking through your market, thinking what moves them, thinking what drives them, understanding what they're seeing already, understanding what they're hearing already, and how can we go in and address a gap? How can we address a gap differently? But I'm also constantly thinking about how can, knowing what I know about the market, knowing what I know interests them, what they want, the problems that they're dealing with, right? What are the from all the information that I'm consuming, right? What's a different angle? What's a different idea? What's an idea that nobody is talking about, right? What's a storyline that nobody's talking about? What's an aspect of what they're thinking about that nobody is addressing? That's one thing. Sometimes when I can't come up with that absolutely different, then I look at, okay, well, if I'm going to be talking about the ordinary, the common, right? What is the different angle, different perspective, different storyline that I can use to talk about the common, so it doesn't feel common, so it doesn't feel ordinary? That's when I say, what is the extraordinary way to present the ordinary? That's what I'm always thinking about when it comes to hooks and themes and ideas. And your hook and your theme should stimulate, or trigger this idea of, wow, that's interesting. Right. So every good hook, theme, idea is both emotionally compelling to the prospect and intellectually interesting. It's emotionally compelling. Understand this. Emotionally compelling comes from really two things, right? It comes from two things. It comes from a primary promise, and it comes from a unique mechanism. It comes from a payoff, a big, bold, audacious, true, and believable payoff, a result, a change, an alleviation of a problem, right? And it also comes from a unique mechanism, a different way of doing that, or of getting that, or of reaping that reward. That's what creates that hope. And that hope is what creates that, or makes it emotionally compelling. Intellectually interesting comes from the storyline that they've never heard before, the angle that they've never heard before. It comes from that curiosity of, I'm not sure what this is, and I want to know what this is. And so when we say, wow, this is interesting, it's emotionally compelling and intellectually interesting. I don't know what this is. I want to know more of what this is, right? And so I haven't heard this before. This is like directly tied to that mental opt-out, preventing that mental opt-out. I do not want them to say, oh, that. Oh, heard it. Oh, seen it. Oh, I know what he's talking about, right? And I got it. I want them to say, haven't heard this before. This feels newsworthy. right? Like this feels like I just stumbled on something newsworthy. Why aren't more people talking about this? Like this seems like it'd be big, right? Like it feels like it stimulates this feeling of discovery. Oh my God, this is big. Like this could be big. This could be the thing. This could be the answer. Holy moly, this could change everything. It's these kind of feelings, this kind of internal dialogue that we are looking to trigger with our idea. Right. And so this is a great, like the value of this for you is that this is the kind of thing that when you come up with a hook, when you come up with an idea, right, you want to ask yourself, right, does this, or will this be able to trigger is this going to trigger that mental opt-out? Are my prospects going to be able to say, I've heard this before? Are prospects going to be able to say, yeah, I know what that is? Are prospects going to be able to say, oh, that fits tightly in this box, that he's talking about tweaking the ad copy on his ads, right? Right. And is this idea, is this hook, are they going to find it interesting? Are they going to say, like, to your audience, is this intellectually interesting? Right? Like, are they going to be able to say, like, this is big, this changes everything? That's what you're looking for. And you want to push yourself until you get to that point, right? Like, and so that's the value of understanding this. Now, when it comes to your hook, and this is really important, okay, I want you to remember the rule of one. This is something that I first learned from, this was drilled into me many moons ago by Michael Masterson, or Mark Ford. Michael Masterson, many of you may know him. That's his pen name. Mark Ford, the marketing genius behind the Agora companies. He really drilled this into me. And there is, like, this is critical because this will kill any, if you don't follow this, this can kill any idea, hook, theme. Number one, the rule of one is that it's based on one narrative, one storyline, meaning it's one idea, right? You're not like, it's not, let's say, how to use a soda can, the weird soda can trick to grow a green lush lawn, and the magic water trick for how to grow grass without, needing a sprinkler or something like that, right? It's one narrative. It's one storyline. It's one idea. It's one idea. Next is it's one main promise, right? And this one promise, the way that I want you to think about this one promise is this is the primary promise, right? So I'm not talking about, remember, I said yesterday that every marketing campaign that you create, your copy should be driven by one overarching promise, one overarching claim of transformation, result, a change, alleviation of pain, and so on. Doesn't mean that we're not going to have a whole lot of benefits underneath that, all the ancillary benefits, all the way that the prospect's life is going to be improved, right? The functional, dimensionalized, emotional, we're going to have all that. But the hook conveys one overarching promise, right? And so the hook, one overarching promise, one primary promise that gets conveyed in the headline, ultimately, which is my go-to, right? And then it's introduced, and then we unpack it, and then we build and stack all of the additional benefits following. So one narrative, one storyline, one promise, one core emotion. Remember, we're not like this is where, where folks, I think it was yesterday, somebody asked, and I get this question asked all the time, right? We know that there are a lot of different emotions that we're going to prod throughout our copy, right? Whether we might try to prod, again, fear of missing out, like we talked about yesterday. We might try to prod that belonging, identity. We might try to prod this idea of exclusivity. We might try to prod this idea of, this emotion of greed, let's just say. We're not going to try to do all of that in the headline when conveying the hook. The hook is about one core emotion. What is that one core emotion that we are trying to stimulate? Is it greed? Is it fear? What is it? right? One core emotion. And then finally, it is the rule of one. The hook rule of one is about leading the prospect to think one thing. I don't want my hook to try to get them to think multiple things. Like, I don't want them to try to process and believe and accept all of these different ideas. I want them to think one thing, right? And that's it's one of these things where you've got to ask yourself when you're developing the hook, what's that one thing that I just want them to think when they see this? What's like the one thing that I want them to think? Is it, like one thing, not multiple things? And you need to understand, and this is the point, this is why I said that this is so important, and I see this mistake all the time, that weak marketing messages, weak marketing themes, weak marketing hooks, weak marketing ideas are crowded with lots of mediocre ideas. Meaning that what happens is, and maybe you've experienced this yourself, what happens is you come up with a hook, right? You come up with a single hook. It is Mike Stenger. You're absolutely right. Mark's book, Mark and my buddy John Ford. They're not related at all. Two buddies of mine. That is one of the best books out there. That Great Leads is one of the best books out there. They do a phenomenal job of summing up Eugene Schwartz's levels of awareness as well as the different lead types. In there. Actually, let me see something. You see this book? How many of you guys like to see book recommendations? Who likes book recommendations? Darn it, David, you got me. David beat me to the punch. Yeah, you love a good book recommendation. So this book, which David said this book right here is also from Mark and from Will Newman, who is a great copywriter, does work with AWAI. This is a great book that really encapsulates the rule of one. The video is too small. It's Persuasion, the subtle art of getting what you want. This is like one of these little tiny books. Like it's a little book. This book is a freaking gem, and yeah, like a gem. And so get this, it's a few bucks. I think it's published by AWAI. They're actually up the road from me. Great book. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Phenomenal. Well worth it, just to understand, if nothing else, just to understand, like it's almost like, right. I don't know when Mark published this, not that long ago, a few years ago, I think, 2014. So a little bit longer than I thought. Phenomenal. This book, like I said, really encapsulates what Mark drilled into me about the idea, how Mark said to me, he really said, for what it's worth, and one day I'll tell you how the first time I met Mark, and I didn't know it was Mark, and I'll tell you the interaction. I thought it was like some crazy old guy. We were at a cigar bar. He was drinking tequila like he normally liked to, and I'm like, this dude's a nut job, man. He's crazy. I love him. He's nuts. And then Rich Sheffrin was like, oh, that's Mark Ford, and I'm like, Mark Ford. And I think that's why Mark ended up liking me, because while everybody else was treating him like royalty, I was teasing him and making fun of him, and I guess he respected that. I don't know, but I love Mark. Mark was, I've told the story before with the hook, the idea that Mark was the guy that when I asked him, how did you grow Agora so big and so fast? And I thought that he was going to say, deep pockets, huge email list, great copywriters. And he just said, he looked at me and he said, we realized early on that we're really in the idea business. We're in the business of creating, developing, disseminating interesting, compelling, contrarian ideas that the marketplace finds interesting, emotionally compelling, shocking. And he said, and that's the foundation of everything we do. The foundation of everything we do is, developing these interesting ideas, hooks, themes, all really the same thing. And so, Mark really drilled into me very early on that weak hooks, weak ideas, weak themes. What happens is when somebody comes up with an idea and they it's not really a great hook, it's not really a great idea, they end up bringing in additional ideas to try to bolster it. Like, right. And this is why you see people in headlines covering multiple things, right? Like how to repair your relationship, how to repair your relationship so you and your spouse are rock solid, and how to have and how to never argue again about finances. And you're like, what? How to repair your relationship, like, how to restore the romance in your relationship, and yet never argue about finances again. Like, it's two mediocre ideas brought together to try to come up with a good idea, but really it weakens the idea. It weakens the idea. And so you don't want multiple mediocre ideas. You want to be patient with yourself to identify one good idea, one narrative storyline, one promise, one core emotion that leads the prospect to think one thing. If there is something that I would share with you, which I covered yesterday, and it ties into this, and you're going to see it over and over and over, and that is focus. That is narrow. That is specificity. You are better off narrowing what you're talking about and getting more specific rather than going wide, rather than opening up with more ideas, rather than trying to appeal to more and more people with a broader message. Narrow, get more specific. The wider you go, the more vague, the more general you get, the less you appeal to anybody. And so narrow, specific, focus, one idea, one narrative, one promise, one core emotion, one thing to think. Here's an example, and I love this. This is not a knock against this marketer. I don't think that this person, I can't remember who this is, that isn't on here. Somebody posted this in our group. This is somebody's getting started, and you could see, right, how to start building your SaaS or platform without developers or funding and increase your project success chances from 8% to 70% with the double sprint method. So this is really bringing in two ideas. One of these things, right, like the project success, could be an ancillary benefit, right, that comes later on. If I wanted to, I probably wouldn't even cover that at all. If the idea is, here's how to build and launch a successful SaaS or platform without developers, something like that, if that's the idea, then that's the idea. Then that's what you're talking about, right? You're not talking about, like, there's this idea here of this is a way for you to launch a SaaS or platform or app or something like that without developers and without needing any funding. And also, here's a way to be successful, to increase your chance of success with your project from 8 to 70%. So you're talking about these two different ideas. You're talking about the idea of launching a successful app without needing developers or funding, and you're talking about being more successful, more productive with your project. Two different ideas that don't belong, right, in the same hook, in the same headline. Like, you're introducing two different things here. And so if the storyline, if the most exciting thing to these prospects is the idea of being able to launch a successful SaaS app, or application or platform or whatever it is, without developers, without funding, then that should be strong enough to carry the entire promotion. Everything should be about that. Everything should be about that, right? And how you can do it quickly and how you can do it easily, and you don't need connections and blah. This is why it works, and this is how it works, and this is why, like, blah blah blah. And if you're afraid that without the funding or developers you won't be successful, you will be. And here's why: it should all be based on that one idea. This is an example of bringing two ideas together to try to bolster it. But what you do is you weaken it. You weaken it. And so get that. Understand that at the foundation of the hook, there's really two things like that power it. And I really already said this, and that's promise and curiosity. Like, every good hook is built on these two elements: promise, an exciting, compelling, promise, one that excites me, one that's big, bold, audacious, true, and believable, and curiosity. Meaning, right? And the curiosity comes into play with the mechanism, right? Like where I'm not sure how this works. I'm not sure what he's talking about. I'm not sure what this is, right? And I want to know more. It sounds compelling. It sounds interesting. It sounds valuable. It sounds like something I don't know. I'm not sure what this is. These two things are really the essence of all effective marketing, especially when it comes to the hook. It's all about promise and curiosity. It's all about payoff and mystery, right? It's all about benefit and intrigue, right? That's what we're talking about here. Promise and curiosity. I have to know more. How can that be? Sounds awesome, but what is it? That comes from promise and curiosity. That's what we're looking for. And so you've got to ask yourself, right? Simple thing, right? Like number one is what's the promise? Is the promise clear? Is the promise specific? Is the promise concrete? Is it big, bold, audacious, true, and believable? And am I piquing curiosity? Am I forcing them to want to know more, right? Am I giving them too much information? Am I giving them just enough information to pique that curiosity? And so hope that makes sense. So Brian asked, would you split it? Would you split into two different marketing campaigns and see which is a stronger hook? Maybe. What I would do, Brian, to be honest, and this is the way that I work, this isn't necessarily the right answer. I don't know if there is a right answer, but this is the answer. This is my approach. Number one is I would take the hook that I believe is the best, right? Like I would take the hook that I believe is the best, right? And the reality is that what proves we've got the best hook is data, right? All of our decisions should be driven by data, or the most amount of decisions possible should be driven objectively, not subjectively. Objectively, right? We're able to make the decision objectively by looking at data. However, with that being said, I'm going to launch what I feel is the most compelling hook. And then if the campaign performs good enough, where if it meets our KPIs for our campaign, I'm going to leave it, right? Like, in other words, and this is a total tangent for this copy training, but I think that it's important. I'm going to share it based on Brian's question here, that, look, if you are, let's say you're willing to acquire buyers at break even, right? So you spend $1,000 or you invest $1,000 in Facebook ads, and as long as you generate $1,000 worth of sales, revenue, you're good with that. Once I have a campaign, if that's, let's say that's our goal, that's our objective, break even. Once we have a campaign that is at break even, I'm going to leave it and let it run, right? I'm going to just let it's hitting our KPI. Good, done, scale it, drive more and more traffic. And let's see if it continues to remain within that KPI. So you've got to recognize that you can try to optimize the performance of a campaign until you are blue in the face, right? Like that is a never ending process. And so you have to be careful. For me, I know what the performance is that I want from a campaign going in. And once I hit it, I'm done. I no longer need to, right? I'm not going to try to give incremental improvements here, there. I will make those incremental improvements when it's out of KPI to get it into KPI. But once it's in KPI, I'm going to let it roll. Right? Like I'm going to let it roll. It's doing its job, the job that I intended for it to do, the job that I needed to do, and I'm going to let it roll. And so that's why I say that I would start with the hook that I believe or I feel is going to be the best performer. That doesn't mean that I'm right, and then I am going to I'm gonna run with it. And if it performs the way that I need it to perform or want it to perform, I'm good with that. Could I potentially test another hook and get it to perform better? Maybe. Sure, maybe. But if it's already performing within the KPI that I want, if it's bringing me buyers on the front end, and for me, right, the front end and for you, for our clients, one of the things that we teach is the front end is all about maximum buyer acquisition. And so I just want, right, I want to be able to acquire the most amount of buyers at a certain cost. If I am within that KPI, I'm going to let it roll. And I'm done with that. It's serving its purpose. It's doing its job. I'm fine with it. I would much rather go and create another back end, right, to further monetize, deliver value to our clients, all of that kind of stuff, increase lifetime value, blah, blah, blah. But I'm going to start with one. And if it performs good, I'm good to go with it. And so hope that answers the question. So should the lead stick to the one idea and avoid mentioning ancillary benefits in the lead? So no. So I'm not talking about in the lead you saw yesterday. I showed you that in the lead, we start to introduce additional benefits, right? Additional benefits. I'm talking about the hook has one overarching promise. The hook gets communicated in the headline, in the deck copy, right? And then we start to unpack it as we get into the campaign. So I'm not saying don't mention additional benefits in the lead. I'm saying that the hook that you are basing your campaign on is based on one overarching promise. There are going to be lots of ancillary benefits that we unpack. And the more of those ancillary benefits, that we have, the more powerful the campaign is going to be, right? Like the more powerful the copy is. I told you guys yesterday, excuse me. I told you yesterday that I've never seen a campaign fail because it had too many benefits. I've only seen campaigns fail because they didn't have enough benefits. And so more benefits, the better in the copy. But the idea is based on one promise of outcome. You might get to this, but how do you pick a hook after doing research? Hardest part is sucking a sexy, curious hook out of the research on the mechanism. How do you pick a hook? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to get into what's involved in the research and the way that I think about identifying hooks. And so let me know if when I get to that, it answers your question. So simple hook checklist follows the hook rule of one. It's big, believable promise of result. It is viewed as new, fresh, timely, doesn't feel like it's old information, doesn't feel like it's dated. It feels fresh. It feels new. It feels timely, like it is appropriate for now. We already talked about specific, concrete, tangible, right? So there's specific, concrete, tangible. It's something that the promise specifically, I can envision it in my mind's eye. Envisioning it in my mind's eye, as we talked about yesterday, us creating those mental images for our prospect is what conjures the emotions. It's what triggers the emotions. The mental pictures trigger the emotions. No mental picture, because too vague, too general, right? You don't get the same visceral emotional response. We also, I said, wanted intellectually interesting. And the last one, which I just want to unpack a little bit more, is that it's easy to grasp. Right. And kind of probably a better way to say this is that your idea, your hook needs to be immediately understandable by the prospect. I've seen marketers, I've seen students bring campaigns where they were like, they had an idea, they conveyed it in the headline. And we talked about yesterday that the hook and the headline are not the same thing. The headline is what communicates the hook or the idea, right? And there's a lot of different ways that you can communicate the same idea, a lot of different words that you can use, right? Like as an example, just as a side note, if I say how to grow huge tomatoes, how to grow gigantic tomatoes, that's the same idea, right? I'm just expressing it with different words, but it's the same underlying idea. I've seen these headlines expressing an idea, and when I say like it's confusing, and the prospect, the marketer would say, well, they'll understand it by the end of the lead. They ain't gonna read the lead. They're not gonna consume the lead. They're not going in, right? Like a confused prospect doesn't remain engaged. A confused prospect doesn't buy. It has to be easily understandable, immediately understandable. Read it, see it, hear it. I get it. Like get it. Simple. And this is why, and you've heard this before and seen this before. This is why, and I said this yesterday in a different context, that you have to be sensitive to the curse of knowledge. The closer you are to your topic, I don't care whether you are doing research for a If you're a copywriter and you're writing for somebody else's product and you're doing massive research examination on their product and becoming, an expert in that arena, or we're talking about your own products, your own services in a marketplace that you've been in for a long time. The closer that you are to the topic, the more knowledgeable you come. You have to be sensitive to this curse of knowledge, which is that we begin to naturally assume that what we assume more than what the prospect knows. In other words, right? Like we become a 9 on a scale of 1 to 10 when it comes to experts on this topic. We're so close to it, right? That we know things, we know the nuances of it, little parts of it. We talk a different language, we use different words, right? And the more you know, and the longer you are around a topic, the more inaccuracies there are in what you assume your audience knows and understands. And so you have to fight that. You've got to remember when I said yesterday that you've got to step out of seeing the world through your own eyes, and you've got to learn to step into your prospect's shoes, right? And that's not an easy thing to do when you've been in a marketplace, in an arena, involved in a topic for 10, 15, 20 years, right? And there are things that you take for granted. There are things that you do, intuitively, they've become intuitive for you. There are things that you understand on a level that your prospect is clueless about. And so you have to be careful that you're not coming up with ideas and communicating ideas in a way that your prospect is totally lost, right? Like and this is why, as a side note, I always think about when learning a new topic, like when I want to learn something. Like I remember when I first wanted to learn, just because I was intrigued about trading options. And I'm wondering if Teddy is on here. I'm wondering, Teddy, if Teddy, I never asked Teddy this, but if Teddy had the same experience I did. I remember for me, Teddy is way smarter than I am in most areas. But when it comes to trading options, I was like, I don't know what the heck is going on. I literally was like, what's an option? You know what I mean? Like, and I had to like dive